So welcome everyone to this beautiful spring day in Middleton, Wisconsin. Just what we had all hoped for in the middle of April. So fortunately, we do have a short agenda. It looks like this afternoon. I guess we can start with the approval of the minutes from the February meeting. Get a motion for approval on that.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Second.
I'd second that.
Betsy, thank you. Any discussion about that? Any changes, any concerns anyone had? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the agenda, Abby, a report on the Workforce Housing Affordable Ownership Task Force, an update from them.
Yes, so we haven't had a task force meeting since the last committee meeting. And kind of at the last meeting, we left it as we had updates on the different ideas. I think there were 5 ideas that were included in the memo that Mike put together with the committee's input. And so we kind of discussed each of those ideas. And then we left it at, we'll continue to make this a working document. Darren had sent out some resources from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. And I think that that's kind of where we left it, but Mike wasn't able to attend our last meeting. So Mike, was there anything that you wanted to add?
I just wanted to see if there are any questions that any of you had before this carried forward, from the committee to the council for consideration in the city's strategic plan, which is now going towards the final stages with Vandewall and Associates. I would anticipate after I've retired that they will bring forward the last stage of the strategic plan, getting into setting up priorities and such. And so I just thought it would be good. This will be my last workforce housing committee with you in this capacity. And if there are questions or additional discussion that needs to be had about what we had here, it did come from a variety of the committee members.
I had something that came to mind since then. And, it's always been said that, condos are difficult to finance because they require 100% sales or some high percentage of sales.
50%.
It's
50%.
Yeah, usually
Right, Mike?
50. Yeah, usually 50 or even as high as 60%.
Okay.
In a
And is
multi-unit development.
that a bank thing? Is it a state law thing? Do we know
I
where
think
it
that's
comes from?
mostly a lender thing, Betsy.
Mhm.
Just because historically financing condo developments has been somewhat risky.
Mhm.
So, and again, every lender is different, but generally, as Mike pointed out, many today are requiring that if a developer is going to develop, let's say 10 condos, they're going to want 5 to 6 of those pre-sold before they would agree to funding the development to begin with, normally.
I guess I'm wondering if that's anything that can be underwritten in some way by the city or by TIF funds or whatever, or guaranteed kind of thing. Because it seems that it may be an issue from a long time ago when there were a huge number of condos being built, and yeah, it was difficult to sell them, but now it's an option that just doesn't exist that often.
Mike, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think that I can't remember if it was in this draft of the report or not, but I'm going to look.
Yeah, you did have it right in the second paragraph.
Well, I was thinking of number 4 on the list, considering the long-term reuse of the city's downtown land in conjunction with the community campus plan. It's altogether possible, I believe, that the city could lease its land to someone interested in condo development. Now, I don't know how much profit there is to gain from that from a developer, but if it could be a not-for-profit developer. It could be Habitat for Humanity, for example.
Yeah.
Who's not seeking to make a profit. And that kind of condo development, since it's financed internally by Habitat, wouldn't have to go through a bank typically. So it would be, I think that could be the partnership where the city enters into a long-term lease with Habitat for Humanity. And then when those condominiums are sold, the land doesn't go with it, but it enables a family to build up equity and move on perhaps to a small house after that. So that you could have perpetually affordable condominiums on land owned by the city. I think it's the same kind of thing with the Madison Area Community Land Trust. Although they take a fee as well, the city wouldn't necessarily have to take a fee. And when I refer to the land in the downtown, Abby and I are familiar with the community campus plan is to have one building on the lots or lots, including the current library and the parking lot adjacent to it. And that could free up City Hall, for example, for that kind of a condominium development. Or it could free up the library parking lot on Terrace Avenue behind the library as a possibility. So these are some concepts that some of us have kicked around, and I just think it's important to consider that in conjunction with the community land, the community campus plan, because there really aren't many options for city ownership of land in such a good location where it can really make a difference. And when you think of the equity benefit of people living close to the library, close to the senior center, in affordable ownership, that to me is a great combination.
Sounds good, thanks.
Are there other questions on the part of the committee? I had a few questions, but if anybody else wants to go, ask Mike.
Yes,
I had Oh, go
So-
ahead.
if this gets put in the strategic plan, then I guess what are next steps after that? Would we continue to work on aspects of it that we saw as promising? Or so just, I get put in the plan, would still be, but in terms of additional action would still kind of sit with us to push forward.
Yeah, Ben, that's a good question. I think, 8 years can pass rather quickly. And at the end of 2030, the city has the opportunity with its TIF district number 3, which is, the downtown is in and the area west of the Beltline is in. It will completely be debt-free and then close. At the end of that time, there's a 1-year period where the city can use proceeds from the TID to be exclusively for workforce housing. And I don't profess to know all of the nuances of that, but it could mean additional land purchase, for example, along the lines of what we just talked about with downtown and condominium development. And to me, the key to affordable housing is ownership of the land in a public or not-for-profit long-term sense. Because as you look at how land values escalate, and they will continue to escalate, I think, there is no means by which to control that. A tax credit program typically runs its course in 30 years.
That's true.
I just
So
had a
yes,
question.
the Workforce Housing Committee would have a role to play, no doubt. Sorry, Sam.
Oh, no problem. I just had a question about the use of Polko, the survey tool. I took the survey for the airport, I think, if I'm remembering correctly.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if that was a successful initiative. Is that something that the city does for many of the things that are somewhat controversial? And is
We-
it
we
helpful
can-
for getting
We
new
can
ideas?
definitely use it more. We have used it for playground selection quite successfully for our parks. And we've used it for the airport. We've used it for our annual survey. And Abby, have you used it for a planning purpose? I don't recall if you
Well,
used
the
it in the
airport master plan, I'm trying to think if we also did it for,
I think we used the results of the national survey for the master plan, comprehensive plan.
yeah, I
But
was
we-
thinking, yeah, I don't think we have used it for anything else, but we can, and we already have a subscription, so that's a benefit.
And we have 10 staff who are trained in use of the survey. And I'm sure one of those is the planning staff. Was that Daphne?
It's Mark.
Mark? Okay. Yeah, so we have the ability to use that under our subscription for a variety of things. Could be one question, it could be 5 questions, it could be 10 questions. But the, putting together a survey concerning support for workforce housing, I think would be a good one to do.
Seems like a topic that's not well understood. Or kind of.
Right, and that's a big part of surveying, is that you have the opportunity then to educate the public as well. And that's what we sought to do with the airport master plan, because despite how much was covered in the local news, it was not surprising to me, but it was, to some folks, that a lot of people weren't familiar that there was a master planning process going on for the airport. So there's probably a lot of people who aren't familiar that we have this committee.
And
That is
I would just
paper.
add into what percent, of our goal that we're trying to achieve, because quite a bit has gone on over the past year on Parmenter. I mean, it's really like a lot. And for people that are not familiar with this committee and our goal and the community's goals and how all that fits into the goal, I think, timing of the survey is very, very key as well. Whether we did it like right now or if we did it in, a year from now, but certainly the landscape has changed quite drastically and quite quickly in Middleton. So I think timing, when a survey might go out, could really affect the results.
It was 7 years ago that the committee worked toward the strategy for workforce housing. So it doesn't seem that long ago to me. But it gives you that kind of a time frame when you think about the end of this TIF district and that the opportunity that we'll have at the end of the TIF district. And so more education, surveys as well, because it probably is the most, if not the most, one of the most contentious issues when there's a development to be built. We've had a few 5-3 votes. For example, on the Kestrel, what is now the Kestrel was the Addy, was a 5-3 vote. And so was the Stagecoach project. Those were both 5-3 votes.
So Mike, I had just a couple of questions, comments. So I think it's great that the city would consider potentially leasing land for a condo development that could ultimately be sold as an affordable home ownership program. Was there any discussion about the city developing housing themselves and then selling it? And let me just tell you why I'm asking that. So normally, let alone the banking issues, Betsy, that we talked about earlier, but one of the dilemmas that for-profit developers have in developing condos or single-family homes, for that matter, and I think we've talked about this at this committee before, is that when they sell a unit, they have to pay ordinary income on that. So the rule of thumb, and I'm not a condo developer, but I've looked at a lot of these financial models, and a general rule of thumb, if your cost is $200,000 to build a condo, normally you're going to sell it, say, for 300,000, about a 50% markup, just because depending on what tax bracket you fall in, when you sell that, it is ordinary income. It's not like selling a multifamily building, which is capital gains. And, that puts, a lot of developers in that 40% tax bracket, by the time you look at state and federal. So you really have to generate a substantial amount of margin just to cover the tax liability from selling a single family home or a condo. So, and I would argue, Mike, that a municipality, even more than a not-for-profit, has even a greater advantage to offer these units at a lower cost, because they have three distinct advantages over the private sector. One, they too are a not-for-profit and would not pay any of that tax. Two, they have a much lower cost of capital. Typically, municipalities can borrow at a much lower rate than anybody in the private sector. And three, as we all know, is they don't have to make a profit. So I guess I go back to this premise, and whether it's now or 8 years from now, when some of that money becomes available, whether or not the city would actually consider building these units and then selling them to those that may have a need. Those dollars would go so much farther than trying the private sector to do it, or even another not-for-profit, just because their cost of capital is going to be considerably higher than what a municipality would realize. So just curious if any of that was ever discussed.
I don't recall discussing it myself. The city typically doesn't build, we hire people to build.
Yep.
So, but under that premise, if we were to hire somebody to build, I think that's certainly possible.
I think
We
it
could
would
hire
be.
Habitat for Humanity to build, for example.
Exactly. And use your borrowing power, or any
Mhm.
municipality's borrowing power,
Yeah.
again, that lower cost of capital. It just allows those very limited dollars to go so much farther to put much needed, home ownership, affordable housing in play.
And Mike, I think what you said about the tax impact is probably at the heart of why condos aren't being built. Because
It's
if
the
there's a
biggest driver.
longer term gain on multifamily housing
Yeah.
without the capital gains impact,
Yeah.
then that makes complete sense to me. If I were a developer, why would I build condos, that kind of a tax impact, if I could have a longer term gain with multifamily housing?
Which is why you've seen so much of it, over the last 10 years. I mean, developers are saying, hey, I can develop this apartment building with 50 units in it and hold it. If I hold it more than a year and I sell it, I'm paying capital gains on that. And so instead of paying 40% tax as ordinary income, I'm paying 20 to 25%. And it is a huge differential when you're talking, large project costs and sale prices.
Right. Well, when you consider that tax credit programs last for at most 30 years,
Mhm.
and the benefit of long-term housing, if it's well maintained, I think what you're saying makes sense. And it's not typical for government doing well to maintain affordable housing units. We've seen that in the past for some of the high multi-level structures in large cities. But one of the things that came out of that whole movement was to have mid-rise buildings that were more accessible and more manageable, and with services nearby. If you have the library and the senior center and retail, you've got the co-op here in the downtown. There's so many accessible services nearby. Transit is another key.
Yep.
Childcare is another key. And assemble all of those things in a location that's walkable for work and retail. It makes all the sense in the world.
And I know it's not something typically a municipality would do. You obviously go out with an RFP, you hire developers to do that. But, I would think in this study here that, maybe even throwing that in there as a possibility, whether it's now or whether it's when those excess TIF dollars are available in 2030. Again, it just might be a great way to leverage those dollars to create far more housing than you would get if you were hiring a private developer to do it.
Love it.
I'm sure that'll stir some feelings on the part of some of the city council. That's not what we do, but
Well,
something to
but-
consider.
the city council has kind of chastised the staff for accommodating rental housing and really incentivizing that. And they want to see more affordable ownership. So
Sure.
I know Dan Ramsey, Kathy Olson, Robert Burke, and Mark Sullivan have all made those statements. And they all seem to support moving in that direction. So I would urge you as a committee to take what Mike just said and add it as one of the points here in this proposal.
Yeah, and it's just my thoughts. I mean, I don't know how everybody else in the committee feels about that, but curious as to your reactions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think any way that we can, produce more of this type of housing, it's great.
Even if the city does that?
Even if the city, yeah.
I was just gonna mention, going back to the conversation about the challenge of condo development. We had a meeting with the Bell Farm team last week, and the developer had a personal issue and was unable to attend. But she sent the person who's working on the financials for the development, and I asked about the condo portion of the project, and she mentioned that now that they've looked into that further, that they aren't sure if they're going to be able to have those be condos. And it's because of the same issues that we're hearing from everyone else, is that they're unable to get financing to build those because of all the challenges. So I just wanted to give the committee a heads up about that. Nothing has been formally requested or set in stone with that, but they have said that they aren't sure if they're going to be able to make it work. And I just wanted to give you a heads up, mostly because as these conversations have come up about the challenges of condo development, especially at the city council meeting, some of our council members have said, well, Bell Farm's doing it. They're making it work somehow. And now we're hearing that they might also not be able to make it work. So just a
Right.
heads up on that.
Right.
The article that I think it was Mike put in the document that he put together was about the issue of why condo development hasn't rebounded, and it's pretty interesting. And it is basically FHA. It's not just a bank thing. So it does require 50% of the condo units
Yeah.
are, well, wait, it says 50% are owner occupied. It doesn't say that they need to be sold before they can give financing. So actually I read that 50% and I went, oh, it's 50, it's FHA.
But you're right, Betsy. I mean, in practical terms, developers developing multiple units, their lender would typically require at least 50% of those condos to be pre-sold before construction begins. And that's a heavy lift for a developer, trying to sell someone a unit that they can't see and touch and walk through. It's a difficult marketing challenge. And again, coupling that with the ordinary income hit, once you do sell it, I mean, it's just a really difficult process for developers to go through, which is why so many have, pivoted to multifamily, where, a lot of that goes away.
Yeah, that link actually was the link that Kurt Paulson had given to me. And it really is an eye opener in why condos aren't being built.
Mhm. And at some point, when we keep running into these things, but we still need more affordable housing, are there recommendations people like Paulson have to encourage change to occur in these institutions? Because when you look at it, what does it come from? Yeah, it came from the housing crisis back in 2008, but it could also be seen as an equity issue too. So,
Yes.
And banks are putting a lot of money into equity issues. I don't know if it would help us, but there are, this type of project, but they are putting a lot of money into different types of projects for this. So don't know if that would allow it to some type of waiver once, of course, banks still held accountable for making good loans too. So I get that they gotta, but might be an opportunity there.
Well, I like Mike's suggestion, or I should just say I like Mike, but
I like you too, Mike. In fact, we don't want you to leave this committee. I know you need a break, but this is a light committee. This isn't like the other city committees. This is fun, important.
I've
This
heard
is
that now
not
from Abby
stressful.
and you all within the course of like 3 hours. So
So Mike, do you have enough information from us to kind of maybe add
Well-
that to this? Do you need some kind of formal
I think it'd be
recommendation?
good to have a formal recommendation from the committee to add it to this list so that we can move it forward into the strategic plan.
Maybe I can throw out and try to summarize. So for the committee to consider. So we would ask that the city consider, whether it's now and or when the additional funds are available, when TIF 3 closes down, consider the possibility of not only contributing land in the form of a lease to new development, but also potentially funding and building new affordable homeowner units for ownership that are affordable, given the fact that they have 3 strategic advantages over the private sector. They don't pay taxes. They have a lower cost of considerably lower cost of capital, and they don't need to make a profit. Therefore, allowing the limited funds that will be available to stretch further and provide more housing, certainly for those in need, more home ownership for those in need.
if that's a
that, Abby?
motion, then I'd second it.
Well stated.
And just a question, so we'd be adding that as like a number 6 to the list then, right? Is that right?
Why don't you make it number 5 and drop the survey down to 6?
Even better,
That way you've got the substance
right?
before you've got the survey.
Okay. Anybody else have anything else to add to that? Questions?
Oh, well, I'll wait till you get back to the main discussion, but
Okay. All right, so I guess we have that motion and a second. All in favor of adding that language to this document, signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay. We have an additional bullet point there for you, Mike.
excellent. Now, concerning bullet point number 3, restarting the down payment assistance program. This came up and I thought it was worth your consideration. However, I will tell you, because Abby and I have worked to administer that program, we still have, I believe, 4 or 5 that are yet to pay off, Abby. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of staff time to do the down payment loans. And the CDA pulled the plug on it, and there is no longer funding from the CDA for that program. So the CDA could consider funding it, but they don't have a viable long-term funding source for it. So I just think it's important for you to know that about the down payment assistance program. I do think it was relatively successful. We did have a few failures, but 15 of the 18 are on track to be totally successful.
So Mike, do you and Abby have any suggestions how this program might be changed where it's not such an administrative burden for staff?
It's the kind of thing that, you know, when we do have the end of TID 3 and the ability to use funds specifically for that, the city could hire a company to execute that program under the guidelines that we put together. It was the first thing really that this committee worked on back in 2004, 2005 with the help of the, I'm forgetting the name now, Wisconsin. You remember the name, Abby? Bill Perkins and
I thought that
Kathy.
they had partnership in their title too.
Yes, Wisconsin Partnership for Housing Development. Thank you.
Yes. WPHD.
Right. And, you know, we worked really hard to come up with guidelines that I think are good for this program. You have to pay back the principal, and it's at 0% interest if you pay it back in 15 years. You can pay it earlier, but if you do, you pay some of the principal back when you sell. And so the goal of the program was so that you not the principal, but the proceeds from the sale. It was designed so that it wouldn't be taken advantage of by somebody seeking to flip a house and just get, you know, cheap financing in doing so. You know, you buy a house for your college student who's poor temporarily and then flip it after you've used the 0%. So we designed it such that you couldn't do that. You had to pay a portion of the sale profit on it if you sold before 15 years. So I think the guidelines are good, but having somebody contracted to do that program, I think would be important. And I know Abby would be a strong second on that.
Well, and also it's not even as much from the time standpoint as the expertise. I just don't think we have the expertise really on our staff. And it's kind of one of those things that you need to have a mechanism in place, like to be monitoring it. So we have a loan that's due right now, for example, it's due to be fully repaid. But we haven't sent the person notification because there was an issue with our billing system where my understanding from a former city employee is that they were automatically going to be receiving an invoice, but it turns out that I somehow have to generate an invoice to them to let them know that they owe $15,000 to the city. And the other real challenge with this is that some of the buyers do not understand their obligations. And I think I mentioned that at a previous meeting. even though it's very well stated in all of the loan documents, I think that some folks thought that the loan was forgivable after 15 years and that they didn't have to pay anything if they stayed in their home. And they do, they still have to pay back the full loan amount. So I've had some pretty unpleasant conversations with some of the borrowers. And, you know, I wasn't around when the program was established and we contracted it out. And, you know, we don't want to have all of that information. We don't want to be the ones that are verifying income and things like that, because all of that becomes a public document. So that's also a challenge of having it administered by us.
Right. Yeah, we knew when we put the program together, there's a chance that the purchasers would not understand all of that, but they would have a banker who, in executing the loan documents with them, would be ethically bound to tell them of their obligation. And so, you know, how many people remember what the banker told them 15 years ago? But at least they have, that's instituted through the process. And when they go to sell the home, we often get contacted by the bank first, right, Abby?
Yeah, when they go to, most of them have actually been for refinancing. So like interest rates change, and then we get a whole wave of borrowers, you know, 7 or 8 that want to refinance. And, you know, we are recorded as a second mortgage. So we have to sign off on any refinancing.
Right.
So generally, a program that staff feels is worth continuing, but, you know, work is needed to, you know, find a mechanism for monitoring and managing this on a going forward basis. And I mean, I'm curious as to how other committee members feel about what was said.
Yeah,
Do we know for sure whether the CDA is not interested in picking this program up again?
No, we don't. And one of the things we had talked about at the last meeting was to send this memo to the CDA to get their input, because they have a lot of interest in affordable housing also. And at our last CDA meeting, which was just last week, I couldn't include it on their agenda because I had like less than an hour because I had another meeting, and they had enough on their agenda to take up that time. So I haven't sent anything to the CDA yet. So that would have to happen at their May meeting.
Yeah, but when we talked about this in the last meeting, I figured that this one had the least amount of enthusiasm behind it and seemed to have the you know, didn't have good prospects moving forward. So
I think the challenge with this one is the amount that would be required for a down payment loan in order to get, you know, the home prices in Middleton have just skyrocketed. So, you know, if you are buying a $350,000 home in Middleton, which actually is difficult to come by, but you're going to have a lot to be able to, if you're at 80% AMI, you're going to need a very large down payment or a very large savings to be able to purchase a $350,000 home.
Yeah, when we were first looking at this 17 years ago, down payments were $10,000 to $20,000 typically, and they've at least doubled since then. So if you're looking, you know, I can't even imagine 20,000 being enough for a down payment. Like Abby said, you're at least going to be looking at 30,000 now, and that's a lot of money. If you have 10 or 20 of those, it's pretty significant, and it's probably not enough because there aren't many homes being built for under $300,000. And I actually can't think of any right now. Or selling for under $300,000 is pretty rare too. So it might be the kind of thing that we look to do with the end of the TIF district and the ability to for that one-time infusion of money towards affordable home or affordable housing.
That seems like that'd be a good use of those funds, assuming you've got some system in place to not overly burden staff to monitor such a program. Seems to me there's a separate group or committee that could be formed to oversee that, made up of bankers, as an example, to help with that live in this world every day.
Right.
Or using
So what
part of
I-
that fund to pay for a contractor, what have you, too.
Exactly, Ben. Yeah, another good idea.
You know, what I could do too is get the actual language of what we're able to do at the end of the TID and incorporate that into this as well. And if you all agree, you know, gear that recommendation towards end of the TID when there would be cash available.
So Mike, do you have a projection as to what you think that might be at the end of?
Depends on how much we spend between now and then. So
Sure.
it's kind of unpredictable.
Yeah.
But we've often thought that we're going to have a considerable amount remaining at the end of the TID. But like I said, it depends on what other opportunities there are.
Yeah. Okay. So is there a specific recommendation you need around this item more than what we've discussed?
I think if we could gear that recommendation towards the end of the TID, that might make more sense rather than, well, the CDA, I suppose, could at least consider it, but it's going to be hard, Abby, you know, to come up with money for this purpose without it coming from TID.
So Sam, are you stepping up to make a specific recommendation in that regard? Thanks for doing that, by the way.
Yes. I would like to make the recommendation to gear this number 3 to take advantage of funds coming available at the end of the TID. And then I think importantly, we need to add that we need to find a reliable organization with the expertise to administer it so that it's not a burden for the staff who has other things to do.
Nicely done. Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Ben. Any other discussion on that? Not all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. What else, Mike? Anything else that you wanted to
I
talk
think if
about?
we could have an overall recommendation with the amendments that you've already made, that would be great. And then we could forward that to the CDA and from the CDA to the council then too.
Somebody want to make that motion?
Sure. I move that we lend our support to the changes that have been suggested in this document so far and move it forward to, did you say the council, Mike?
The CDA and the council.
To the CDA and the council.
Thank you, Betsy. Second,
This is Darren, I'll second.
Darren. Any further discussion? If not, can we have take it up for a vote? Anybody in support signify by saying aye.
All right.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. Evie, anything else that we need to chat about?
I think that was it.
Just one note, we mentioned about citizen appointments at the beginning of the meeting. So the appointments for citizen members are due to be made by the mayor the third Tuesday in May, which would be the 17th, for effectively for the 1st of June.
Okay. Does the mayor have folks in mind for this committee? Do you know, Mike?
I do not know.
I
He
certainly
was
have.
on a couple-week vacation, but he's back now, and I know he's interviewing people.
So I guess anybody on the committee, if you have anybody you think that would be a great addition to this committee, send an email to the mayor.
So if we're on the committee, we have to apply, like, I have an appointment with him tomorrow. I got like a Survey Monkey or something from the clerk, and I had scheduled something. Are other people that are up also meeting with the mayor? Is that how that works?
Yes, you have to meet with them if you want to stay on the committee. You won't get reappointed if you do not
Okay.
schedule.
If
All right.
if your term is up, and the folks whose term is up are Rob
Okay.
Bergendahl, Betsy Day, Darren Fortney, and Julia Vondrack.
Gotcha. All right.
And also, I just sent you all the invitation to Mike's retirement party. May 5th, Lakeview Park, 5 to 8 p.m. Everyone's invited. Program will be at 6.
And I'm providing the beer and wine, so we will have it there,
Nice.
just not in bottles.
And he bought plenty. So
Lots.
the more the merrier.
It's all sitting in my office right now.
Here to a snowy retirement party.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Just kidding.
Yeah, congrats, Mike.
Thank you.
Job well done for the city of Middleton.
Must feel pretty amazing. Be looking forward to such a short time towards being free from work. How about that?
2.5 weeks.
I'm sure there's
That's what I'm
plenty of
finding.
other feelings too. Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
All right, well, if there's nothing else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
All right,
And I'll
second.
second.
All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, all right,
Aye.
motion
Thanks,
carried.
everybody, and thanks for your
Yeah.
service on this
Yeah.
committee.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
Mike.
you,
Thanks
Mike.
to the committee as
Thank
well.
you. Take care. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah.
Abby.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.